Chris Hemsworth has opened up in a candid and introspective way about one of the most significant and unexpected downsides that came with portraying the iconic Marvel superhero Thor over the course of more than a decade. In a recent conversation, the Australian actor took time to reflect deeply on how the larger-than-life role actually hindered his personal and artistic growth in certain respects, rather than expanding it in the way many might assume. Hemsworth explained that embodying Thor provided him with a kind of protective shield, both on screen and in his own psyche. The character's godlike stature, booming voice, muscular physique, and commanding presence allowed him to adopt a persona that felt invincible and unassailable. This external armor became something he leaned on heavily, especially early in his career when self-doubt and anxiety were far more prevalent than he ever let the public see. He described how, when he was first cast in the role, he was far more uncomfortable and awkward in his own skin than he appeared. Behind the scenes, away from the cameras and the spotlight, he grappled with intense performance anxiety and even full-blown panic attacks that left him feeling exposed and uncertain. To cope with those feelings of vulnerability, Hemsworth turned to physical transformation as a strategy. He committed himself to rigorous training regimens that sculpted his body into the imposing, heroic figure audiences expected from a Norse god. He deliberately lowered the pitch of his voice to sound more authoritative and commanding, and he worked on adopting a broader, more dominant posture that helped him take up space in a way that projected confidence. These changes weren't just about meeting the physical demands of the costume and the action sequences, they were deeply psychological. By altering how he looked and carried himself, he created a buffer between his real insecurities and the persona he was projecting. He recalled thinking to himself during those early days, "Okay, cool, no one can mess with me." Playing a literal god became a safety net. It convinced others, and to some extent himself, that he was as certain and unbreakable as the character he portrayed. That sense of safety, however, came with a hidden cost. Over time, Hemsworth realized that relying so heavily on those external tools, the vocal quality, the posture, the sheer physicality, meant he wasn't forced to confront or develop other, more subtle aspects of his craft. The role gave him permission to hide behind spectacle rather than dig into raw emotional vulnerability. Thor's bombastic energy and grand-scale battles rarely required him to strip away the layers and reveal something quieter, more human, or more uncertain. The character's strength became a crutch that limited how far he could push himself as an actor. This realization became especially clear when he took on a recent role in a completely different kind of project. A cool, grounded procedural thriller directed by Bart Layton. In this film, titled Crime 101, Hemsworth delivered a performance that was deliberately stripped back and understated. There were no capes, no hammers, no exaggerated accents or heroic poses to lean on. Instead, the role demanded that he appear ordinary, flawed, and emotionally exposed. He described the experience as one that left him feeling quite exposed in a way he hadn't anticipated. Without the familiar armor of Thor, he had to rely entirely on nuance, stillness, and authenticity. He explained that he wasn't able to hide behind a vocal quality or posture the way I could with Thor and these larger characters. In fact, the challenge required him to do the exact opposite, to remove the layers rather than add them. Playing this more restrained character forced Hemsworth to confront parts of himself that he had kept protected for years. The vulnerability he felt on set was uncomfortable at first, but it also proved liberating. It reminded him of the actor he wanted to be, someone capable of range, subtlety, and emotional honesty rather than just spectacle. The contrast between the two experiences, the bombastic safety of Thor and the raw exposure of this new role, highlighted how much he had come to depend on the superhero persona as a form of emotional insulation. Hemsworth's reflections also shed light on the broader pressures that actors face when tied to massive franchises. Playing a character like Thor brings global fame, enormous paychecks, and cultural relevance, but it can also lock an actor into a narrow lane. The audience expects a certain look, a certain energy, and a certain level of invincibility. Deviating from that risks disappointing fans or undermining the brand. Over time, that expectation can subtly shape how an actor approaches their work, encouraging them to stay within the lines rather than explore new territory. Hemsworth acknowledged that the role helped him build confidence outwardly, but inwardly it sometimes kept him from taking risks that would have pushed his abilities further. Looking back, he sees the Thor years as both a blessing and a limitation. They gave him a platform that changed his life and career, introducing him to audiences around the world and allowing him to headline some of the biggest films ever made. At the same time, they created a comfort zone that became harder to escape from. The physicality, the voice, the swagger, all of it served a purpose, but it also became a barrier to more intimate, revealing work. By stepping away from that safety net in projects like Crime 101, Hemsworth is rediscovering what it feels like to act without protection, to be seen as a person rather than a myth.